Del Peña from Centennial Living History Association's La Compañía de Béjar. I'm here with you guys today to do a little informal video about uniform styles of the Mexican Army. I know there's a lot of information out there. This is really just to kind of get it out there into the community so everybody kind of has an idea of what page that we're on, what page everybody else is on, and what uniform style that we've chosen to go with. I've had a lot of questions lately about, Philip, why did y'all pick that uniform style? There's others. What are the different types of units? What we're planning on doing is a series of these informative videos to kind of talk about the Mexican soldado, the impression, how it's developed, where it developed from, and what the best documentation is out there. I figured I'd start with maybe the most central part of a Mexican soldier impression, and that is the uniform. What you're looking at right now, guys, is what we refer to as the 1833 contract Coatee. Now, this uniform was not the first and only uniform that the Mexican Army had. I want to get that out of the way first and foremost. But based on the research we've done, we believe that this is probably the most common Mexican uniform that would have been seen during the Texas Revolution. So let me kind of explain what this guy is first. This is a single-breasted coatee. It has tails on the back, so it is a tailcoat. The tails are separate. They are separate piece tails. It's not just one big piece. I've seen those on some reproductions. This is separate pieces, and actually if you took the tails off, it would pretty much be a roundabout. The U.S. Army during the same time period had a similar uniform, and actually from what we understand about records from Fort Snelling is that old coatees actually did have their tails removed and used as roundabouts for fatigue duty. But this is a reproduction that was made by Steve Abold from Allegheny Arsenal, and I'll get into a little bit about what pattern Steve used when he created this coatee, but I want to give a little bit of background first on some of the features. It is a dark blue wool, kind of a rough wool broadcloth with scarlet turnbacks, piping, collar, and cuffs. It's really a model of 1830s fashion. Very tight to the body, very shaped sleeves. When you wear it, it is designed to give you a certain military look, and that's really what they were going for when they designed the originals. So, how did we get to this model of coatee? Why this coatee of all coatees? First of all, the 1833 contract that was put out by the Mexican government specified dark blue tailcoat, scarlet turnbacks, piping, collars, and cuffs. Previously to the 1833 contract was the 1832 contract, which specified dark blue body, scarlet collars, cuffs, turnbacks, and white piping. There's one more feature. It also specified lapels, red lapels. Now, this has been interpreted a couple ways. The first way it's been interpreted is that perhaps the coatee was not a single-breasted coatee. Perhaps it was they had a plastron-like feature, bib-like plastron, which then connected with hook and eyelets. That's one possibility. The other possibility, and the one that I tend to think is more correct, is that the 1832 contract was actually replacing an earlier single-breasted coatee, scarlet collars, cuffs with white piping. You still see some of these reproductions out there sometimes. Joseph Hefter illustrated a couple of these. He illustrated one in El Soldado Mexicano, and there's also a couple more he did in various other commemorative pieces that illustrated this kind of transition coatee from the earlier 1820s coatees, the type you see that Claudio Lunati drew, up until the 1830s, and when Hefter drew his 1832 model coatee on a sergeant in the Matamoros Battalion. The reality is that when you think of the cost that probably went into constructing these coats, the Mexican government was probably looking for what was the cheapest option, and the cheapest option would have been just adding buttons and then a plastron over older coatees. We know for a fact that they did this in the late 1830s and the 1840s going up to the Mexican War, because this coatee is actually based off of an original coat that was captured during the U.S.-Mexican War. Now, this coat was of the 4th Line Regiment. And now, a really well-known military artist and historian, H.C. McBaron, got to look at that coat. There's pictures of it floating around the internet. I know that they were taken by Gary Foreman. There's some great photos, so if you see them on any of the websites, please take a look. It helps you really understand how these things were made. And that coat had actually been recycled. It was an older coat. The sleeves had been replaced. There were two names on the inside of the coat. And what the theory is that McBaron felt, as well as Mr. Abel from Allegheny Arsenal, was that it was actually an 1830s coat under the 1833 contract that had then been, I guess refit is the right word, into a uniform of the 4th Light Infantry. It had a green collar put onto it. The sleeves had been replaced. They were actually different wools. And they had added, according to the regulations, would be a different colored lapels or a bib-like plastron, but it wasn't hook and eyelets. It instead was actually a separate piece of cloth that had been cut into a plastron, and then buttons sewn onto the coatee, and then it was attached. This actually makes a lot of sense when you think of a cash poor country like Mexico during this time period, that they would be making the use of as much materials as possible. Now, the other place that coatees like this show up, and we also think might be the earlier pre-1832 contract, is that if you look at a copy of the Battle of Tampico, you'll see that most of the figures are wearing single-breasted coatees, piped either in red or white. There's not a single 1832 contract coatee. In fact, there's almost no, if any, 1832 contract coatees illustrated almost anywhere, which is really odd because we have so many illustrations of single-breasted coatees, but none of coatees with either lapels or the additional plastron. There are some of cavalry troopers, but again, they don't have the plastron. They have the buttons as if, say, it was a separate piece. So more than likely, most of the coatees in the Mexican Army would have been single-breasted coatees, scarlet collar cuffs, turnbacks, with either scarlet piping, or even some of the older coatees might have had white piping. It's a possibility, but more than likely, most of them would have had scarlet. Well, I hope you guys found this video educational. Hope it helps you understand a little bit more about the way these garments are constructed. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them or send them my way. This is the first of a series of videos. We'll be doing them on different aspects of the Mexican soldier impression, from the coatee to next, I think we've got shakos coming up and some other shako devices and badges. So hope you found it enjoyable. Until we see you again, guys, have a great one. Thanks. Thanks.